What's up everybody, welcome back. So in this video we're gonna set up the fire animation for the weapon and also apply procedural recoil. So we're gonna use curve animations again because that's what this tutorial is about, and I'm gonna use the CurvePlayer to get the recoil values. I'm not gonna show you the creation of the animation. You could watch previous videos to check out how that works. So in this video we're going to dive into the recoil part of the CurvePlayer and also how to set it up on your character as well. So let's dive into it, and at the end it's going to look something like this. So you actually have recoil applied to the weapon as well. So let's get started. So I'm inside my CurvePlayer project and I've created 2.1 second curves to use for my fire animation, the translation and rotation curve, and I'm going to use the CurvePlayer to get the recoil values that I want to use for the pistol. So if you want to get your hands on the CurvePlayer, you can join the gamedev raw Discord and you can get the project files there just for free. Or if you just want to chat with other people or have questions about a video, or you want to show off some stuff you made, join the Discord and jump in. You're welcome, and it's a fun time, so I hope to see you there. So let's start by setting up the recoil for the pistol. So I'm gonna make sure that I have the animation set up in a track over here. So this is the simple animation that I made, and I'm gonna apply procedural recoil to it to make it look a little bit better. So over here I can set it up, and the first thing I want to do is adjust the fire time. So my animation is 0.1 seconds. I'm gonna set this to 0.2 so I can loop it. And for the recoil time, this is the value that we're gonna enter in the script later. So you want this to be smaller than the fire time, and this is the length of the animation where it will actually apply the procedural recoil. So I'm going to set this to 0.6 and the fire animation is 0.10, so that should be good. 0.06, so screw up. Okay, there we go. Now if I tick this little box over here to sync animation track 1, then if I press the fire weapon, it will fire the fire animation, but it will also apply the procedural recoil so I can see how it looks. I'm going to set it to auto fire so it just loops. And that's why I made the fire time longer than the actual animation, otherwise it's going to fire really fast. So this represents a little bit better what a player would do, probably. Now let me see, for the translation I want to move the gun up, so let me move it up a little bit, say something in between 1 and 2.5 units. And you can already see the gun is moving up way more than it was before. So I want to move it backwards as well. So let's say -6. It's probably a bit much. Let's go -5, and the maximum is going to be -3, something like that. I think I'm going to reduce the upwards movement a little bit. Something like that. And then I also want to rotate it a little bit, so the -x should rotate it upwards, I'm pretty sure. So let's say -4 and -2. And we have a little bit of recoil applied to it. So you can also play around with the interpolation speed. So this is the speed for applying the recoil, and this is for reducing it back to 0. So if I would decrease this number, then you would get a bit more recoil. And you could also increase this number and it will be a much harder animation. And if you lower the number, it will be a little bit like you reduce the alpha a little bit. So you can play around with these settings as well. So for now I'm just gonna leave it as it is. I can live with this, and I'm gonna show you how to implement this into your project. But first of all, I'm gonna print all of these settings so I can actually use them. So I cannot store these in my blueprints. So I just have to put them in manually so I can print them to my log and then paste them in a text file so I can use them later. For the clamps over here, you can choose to enable clamps, and that way you can set maximum values so your recoil won't exceed that value if you want to clamp it. So you can also see how that looks and play around with those settings over here. So if I press the print recoil to log, then I can go to my developer tools and then the output log, this one. And over here you will see all of the recoil settings printed. So I'm gonna copy and paste them into a text file so I can use them later. So that's on my other monitor, but I got them stored. So we are good to go over here. I'm going to migrate my fire animation curves into my game project, and I'll see you guys in the project. So first of all, I have created a structure to set all of the recoil variables. You could choose to add them to the weapon info structure as well, but it's going to be a really big structure, and for the sake of organization I have just created a new one. So make sure that you create it and that you add all of these variables. So there are a lot of them. So pretty much all of them are floats. There's one boolean to enable the clamps, and then all of the recoil settings. So the TR is for translation, and then we have a minimal and maximum. And we also have the rotation settings, so that's RT, and then we have clamps as well. So there's a whole bunch of them. Make sure that you add all of them. So you should have enough time to pause the video, so I'm going to close it. Now we are going to create another data table as well. So go to miscellaneous, create a data table, and I'm going to create it for the recoil. So this is my weapon recoil table. And I'm going to open it up, and I'm going to add one row for the pistol. And then I'm going to get the text file where I pasted all of the recoil settings from the CurvePlayer, and I can simply put them in here. So that matches, and the recoil should match. So the interp apply and 0, that was 15 and 10. I don't have clamps enabled, and then I only had some rotation on the Y, so that was -5 to -3. And we did some, translation it was, and it's also translation from -1, no, sorry, 1 to 1.5. And then we had rotation on the X, and that was -4 to -2. There we go. So no clamps, so everything else should be 0. That's fine. So that's my pistol recoil. Now we want to go into the animation blueprint, and over here again you want to create all of these variables. So those are the same ones that we used in the structure, so just create all of them again, and then we're going to use them to set up the recoil. So we're going to create a function, and let's call this setup recoil. And over here we want to get all of these setters. Oh, come on. Don't tell me you didn't copy them, you little. So let's try it again. There we go. And now we simply want to drag them onto the pin, so we get inputs for all of them. And we can call this function from the character when we switch weapons, and it will apply the correct recoil. So It's a bit annoying, but we should get there in the end. Only a few left. There we go. Okay, that one didn't make it. What the deuce? Translate. Oh, this is all screwed up. Oh, come on. Okay, this is not good. I'm gonna redo it and I'll be back in a sec. Okay, I'm back and this time it worked. So each one of these variables has its own input pin, and make sure you also connect the enable clamps and the recoil interp speeds. So we have all of them connected up. We can close this down and let's see. So let's add the functions in the event graph. So let's see where we're at. So first we need another variable as well, and that's going to be apply recoil. Now we're going to create a custom event, and that's called fire weapon, or maybe apply recoil, that's better probably. No, I can't do that because the boolean is already called recoil. So apply weapon recoil. There we go. And I want to create another custom event, and that's stop apply recoil. So in the last event, all I'm doing is setting it back to false, and that's good to go. And for the first event, I want to get a boolean in here to check if I'm using clamps or not. So get the enable clamps and drop it on here. And then we want to set the current recoil variable, so we don't have that as well, so we need to create a few more variables just for the fun of it, and that's going to be a transforms. So let's create a variable and call this current recoil. That's a transform. Then we need another one, and that's the target recoil. And a third transform, and that's going to be an empty transform. And there's two more variables. No, I think we should be good to go. So let's stop creating variables. I think you've had enough for now. So let's drag in our current recoil over here. And what we want to do is get a compose node. So drag off and look for compose transforms. Now the second struct splint. So we're gonna split this, and we're gonna split the location and the rotation again, so we end up with a bunch of floats. And now we can simply plug in the values that we have from our recoil settings. So this is going to be the branch for the false pin, so we're not using clamps, so we can simply drag in the minimal and the maximum value. And then we're going to get a random float in range and plug in the maximum over here and plug this into the location. And now do this for all of the pins. So 4, 5, 6. Y, Z, and then for the rotation as well. And make sure that you plug in the correct variables, obviously. And the rotation, no, the rotation minimal, maximum, there we go. So if we have the new target transform, then we want to store that. So we're simply gonna drag in the target transform recoil over here, and we're gonna split this again. And also the rotation and translation. And let's do the same over here. Now we can connect these up without doing anything. And for the clamps, we're gonna add a few more nodes in between them. So first make sure that we connect up the setter, otherwise nothing will happen obviously. And after this we're going to set the apply recoil boolean to true. Now let's get this node and duplicate it over here. Hook this up to the true pin. And now we want to clamp our variables. So we need to get some clamps in here. Drag off from the X value for the location and look for a clamp float. And now in this node you can plug in the values from the recoil. So make sure you hook up X to X, etc. Location to location, translation to rotation to rotation, and the translation to the translation. So we need 6 of these, and this one is the X. This is going to be Y and Z. So the Y and the Z over here. And let's get the correct clamp values as well. So this is going to be a bit of spaghetti, but there's not really a way around it. So set the rotation as well and plug them into this node for the values. And make sure that we use the correct clamp values. And then we have the correct settings applied for our recoil. So hook this up to the apply node as well. And that should be good to go. Now we need to go into the blueprint update animation event, and we need to add some stuff in here to actually apply it. So let me double check my notes. We're gonna get a branch in here and we're gonna check the apply recoil boolean. So if we want to apply recoil, then we're gonna interpolate from our current recoil to our target recoil. So we're gonna interp to a transform, de-interp to, and the target is going to be the target recoil, and that's what we set in this function over here, where we added it to the current recoil. We use the compose node. So we need to plug in the interp speed over here, and that's our interp apply speed. For the delta time, we can get it from the event node. So that should be this one, delta time. So you can get it from here. And then we want to store this in the current recoil. And this should be hooked up to the true pin. Now after this we're gonna get another branch. And then we're gonna drag in the current recoil. And we want to do a nearly equal to. And we want to check if we are nearly equal to 0. So if we are back in our resting position or not. So we could mess around with the tolerance a little bit. Otherwise the interps might take a bit long. So I'm going to remove 1 0 out of both of these. And just plug them into the branch. Now make sure that you hook this up to the false pin as well. So if we don't want to add recoil, we still might want to apply it back to 0. So we're gonna add another interp2 node over here. And if we want to interpolate back to 0, we're gonna go from our current recoil to an empty transform. So this is just 0 all the way. And over here we need the interp 0 speed. And we need the delta time again. There we go. And then we should add it in the current recoil, and we can hook this up to the false pin. So if it's not true, then we're gonna interp back to 0. And now to make these variables do something, we need to go into our animation graph and get one of these transform modify bow nodes. And we're gonna use them, that one, to apply the recoil. So let's get one of these, copy and paste it, and make sure you hook it up. So it's set to IK hand gun, that's fine. Translation add to existing, rotation as well in component space. And then we can drag in the current recoil, no, not a setter but a getter. Split it and plug those variables into the transform node. And that should be good to go. Now all we need to do is from the character actually set the variables when we switch weapons. So let's open up the first person character. And then I'm gonna create an event. So first let's go to the fire weapon event over here. And where we actually fire the weapon in the loop, so where we have the fire bullet trace, I'm gonna apply the recoil as well. So I'm gonna add a custom event and I'm gonna call this apply recoil. And I have a reference to my animation instance in here somewhere, I think, at least. I should have one. So animation, or maybe not. So in that case, we're gonna create one. So let's go to begin play first. And let's look for, well, over here maybe, before we do the weapon stuff. Make a bit of room, and we're gonna get our first person mesh in here. Drag off here and get the animation instance. And we want to cast this to our first person character animation blueprint. And then we're gonna store that to a variable. Promote to variable, and that's my anim instance BP. And now we can use this to set the recoil. So let's do that first while we're at it. So let's create another function in here. And I'm gonna call this setup recoil. Give this one input, and that's my weapon row name. So that's a name variable. Then I'm gonna get the data table row. Plug in the weapon row name and get the recoil table. Split the outcome. And then I'm gonna get the animation instance. So that's over here, and call my setup recoil function. So now we can simply hook all of these up. So the interps are below. Then we have the boolean, and all of the other ones should go just like this. Oh, come on. There we go. So this is hooked up to the row found pin, and then we can simply return because we are done setting up the recoil. So go back to the event graph, and when we add a weapon, so here we have the setup weapon, and then we're going to set up the recoil as well. So let's do this the right way. I'm going to get the inventory names and then get a copy. And get a copy of my current weapon index, and that's 0, so that's gonna return the pistol. And I can just plug it into all of these nodes. So there we go. Now we can go back to the fire weapon event, and we have the apply recoil over here. So let me see, we want to get the animation instance and call the apply recoil event. So apply weapon recoil, and then we're gonna wait, put a delay in here for the recoil time, and we don't actually have that variable yet. So let's go to the weapons folder, to the weapons recoil table and the structure. So add a new variable to the structure, and this is going to be my current weapon recoil time. So recoil time, and that's a float. So you might actually want to add this in the weapon structure. Maybe that's a better idea. So let's close this down and go to the weapon structure, add a variable in here. This is my recoil time. Add this to be a float and save it. Then make sure that I actually set the variable for the pistol. So pistol recoil time should be 0.06. And then in our first person character setup weapon event, we have the new variable. So promote it to a variable. That's our current weapon recoil. And plug it in the execution pin over here. And now if we go back to the event graph, we can hook this up to the delay node. And after that, simply call the stop apply recoil. And now all we have to do in the actual fire event is call apply recoil. There we go. So this should work, I think. So let's keep our fingers crossed. And nothing is happening. So that's nice. I'll get back to you in a sec. Okay, remember when I said let's do this the right way, I screwed up. So for the add weapon to inventory, you don't want to hook this up obviously, because you're gonna add an empty weapon. So make sure that you add your weapon name when you add it actually to the inventory, and over here you can do it the right way and get the name from the array if you want to. And then this should work. So if I play this, so you can see the recoil is being applied, and it actually raises the weapon and also adds a bit of spread. So we have a procedural recoil with a curve animation for firing. So that's how we set it up. It was a whole bunch of variables creating, but other than that, it wasn't really too bad, I think. So thanks for watching, everybody. I hope you enjoyed, and if you want to join the Game Dev Raw Discord, all of you guys are welcome to have a chat or ask questions about the video, or just get the project files, whatever you want. And thanks for watching. Later, guys.